The note was duct taped to my gym bag, the same bag I'd used for 5 years, even though I haven't set foot in a gym since 2019. Reflect on your actions. Not even signed. Just a stack of boxes on the porch, my name scrawled across one in permanent marker, and the locks changed without warning. My toothbrush was sticking out of a sock. One of my work boots was missing. My razor was thrown in next to my passport like they wanted me to leave the country, not just the house. I looked through the window. She was inside, laughing. I could hear it through the glass. Her and her sisters, like it was just another wine night. Like they hadn't just erased me from the home I paid for. There's a moment you realize you're not a husband anymore. You're not even a man. You're just a monthly deposit and a Wi-Fi password they've memorized. That moment, for me, was when I saw my favorite hoodie being used to wipe up spilled sangria. That hoodie survived my father's funeral. It didn't survive Celeste and her sisters. It wasn't always like this. It started slow. They moved in just for a while. And I said yes, because I always say yes. Because saying no gets me called selfish, or ungrateful, or controlling. The house got louder. The fridge got emptier. My side of the bed got colder. Celeste stopped looking me in the eyes. Started saying things like, "You're not growing," or "You've changed," when I asked her to stop using my credit card for kombucha and LED moon lamps. But I stayed. I swallowed it. I told myself it was temporary. Then one morning, I asked them all to sit down. Just to talk. I brought out my spreadsheet. The one I spent 3 hours putting together, color-coded, broken down by expense. I even added a column called Suggested Contribution because I didn't want to sound demanding. Celeste didn't even open it. She stared at me like I farted at her wedding. Mavis laughed. Jolene took a selfie mid-conversation. Darla asked if I was having a finance bro episode. I didn't shout. I didn't beg. I just said, if I'm going to pay the mortgage alone, I need help with everything else. Groceries, utilities, even just taking out the trash. Celeste tilted her head and said, if the weight is too much, maybe you weren't meant to carry it. And now, here I am, sitting in my car with my entire life in the back seat and a banana peel on top of my pillow like a parting gift. They think I'm weak. They think I'll cry in a motel room for a week and disappear. But that's not what's going to happen. Because I did reflect. And I realized something. This was never just about money. This was a plan. And they made one mistake. They left my name on the deed. I drove around for hours that night with the heater off and the radio silent, just listening to my thoughts knock around like loose screws in a tin can. I kept thinking, this can't be real. You don't just get kicked out of your own house without a warning, without even a damn text. You don't go from "love you, babe" to "here's your toothbrush and a sock" overnight, unless it was never about love to begin with. And that idea, that maybe I was never anything more than a placeholder to her, gnawed at me like termites in the walls of my sanity. I finally pulled into a 24-hour gas station and parked under the flickering lights like a moth drawn to misery. I sat there, surrounded by plastic bags full of my own clothes, staring at a half-eaten protein bar I found wedged in the glove box. I didn't need it. I just held it, like it might comfort me. It didn't. That's when I remembered something. Barely a whisper of a memory, but it hit like a freight train. 2 months ago, I had asked Celeste why she never wanted to talk about the future anymore. We used to plan things. Vacations, renovations, even baby names. She laughed and said, "Let's not pretend we're building anything here, Harlan. You're just maintenance." I thought she was being sarcastic. But now, that line echoed back like it was rehearsed. When I finally found a motel, the clerk didn't even ask for ID. Just looked at my face and handed me the key like I was the third guy that week who got kicked out by someone prettier than him. The room smelled like bleach and secrets. The ceiling had a brown stain shaped vaguely like Florida, and I stared at it like it had answers. It didn't. I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the last 3 years in my head, and not just the obvious signs I missed, but the tiny red flags I folded into origami swans to make myself feel better. Like how Celeste used to joke that she married down because I had safe energy. Or how Mavis once called me Plan B with a tool belt when she was drunk. Or how Jolene had slipped up and said "our house" once when talking to a delivery driver, then laughed it off like I was being sensitive. But the real gut punch came the next morning. I logged into our joint bank account, not out of curiosity, but out of habit. I always checked it before grocery runs. And right there, front and center, was a $2,000 Venmo transfer From Celeste to someone named Camille. The memo? Final installment. Final installment of what? I scrolled further. Weekly transfers. Always to Camille. Amounts ranging from $250 to $600. Sometimes tagged consulting, other times covering my half. Consulting? I clicked into the history. Camille had been getting paid for nearly 8 months straight. Always regular, always on Fridays. And I remembered that name. Camille was Celeste's career coach. At least, that's what she told me when I asked about the monthly Zoom meetings she took with the door locked and music playing. Now I wasn't so sure. This wasn't about them being offended by my little spreadsheet. This wasn't just a reaction to one conversation about finances. This was coordinated. The laughing, the calmness, the timing. They didn't get mad and act impulsively. They planned this. They waited until they were legally secure enough, until the locks were changed, until the paperwork was probably already in motion. And they did it with a smile. So now I'm sitting here in a motel that charges extra for a second towel, knowing that they're still sleeping in my bed, using my Wi-Fi, drinking almond milk from my fridge, probably talking about how toxic I was for daring to ask for help. But what they don't know is I already called the mortgage company, and the house title? Still in my name. I didn't shower the next morning. I didn't even move for a while. I just sat in that cheap motel chair staring at a phone screen, so cracked I could barely read Camille's name anymore. The woman Celeste had paid thousands of dollars to, over time, quietly, like it was a bill she didn't want me to know about. Final installment. It kept echoing like a cruel joke. That wasn't a payment for coaching. That sounded like a deal being completed. Like something had been arranged and signed off behind my back. That thought stuck in my throat the whole day. I skipped work. Called in sick, though I wasn't sure if I even had any days left. I couldn't show my face at the job site. Not after what happened. I imagined trying to explain it to the guys. Yeah. My wife kicked me out for asking her sisters to buy their own cereal. Anyway, let's load some planks. No thanks. I spent most of the day in my car, driving around our old neighborhood like a ghost retracing its death scene. I didn't go near the house, wasn't ready for that yet, but I parked at the end of the block and watched the windows from a distance. Someone walked past the curtain in the living room. Blonde. Too tall to be Celeste. Probably Jolene. I felt like a stalker. Maybe I was one now. The kind who paid the mortgage and still didn't get visitation rights to his own couch. Later that night, I found something that turned my gut cold. I remembered that Celeste used to sync her calendar to our shared Gmail. Mostly to track appointments, deliveries, dinner plans we never followed through on. I had forgotten it still existed. But it did. And she forgot to unsync it from my phone. There it was. An event. Scheduled 2 weeks ago. Title: C+J+D. Final phase begins. Location: our address. Time: the exact morning I was locked out. I stared at it like it might change. Like maybe I read it wrong. But I didn't. Final phase. That wasn't a slip. That was strategy. A label you use when you're finishing something you've been building brick by brick in silence. I clicked details. The guest list had 4 names. Celeste, Mavis, Jolene, Darla. No surprises there. But there was a 5th name. Camille M. She wasn't just a coach. She was involved. I don't know how. I don't know why. But Celeste didn't plan this with just her sisters. She had outside help. That's when the worst possibilities started crawling into my head like smoke under a locked door. What if Camille wasn't a consultant? What if she was a lawyer? Or worse, what if she was a middleman? I thought about all the times Celeste had gone out without telling me where. Nights she said she was networking. Days she told me she was taking her sisters for self-care, but came back smelling like a stranger's car. I thought about how quick she was to block me. How silent she'd been since. No apology. No explanation. No fear of consequences. She wasn't scared because she knew exactly what she was doing. And they weren't just removing me from the house. They were removing me from the narrative. I called my bank. My name was still on the mortgage. Good. But I wasn't naive. I knew she'd make a move. Probably already had. So I opened a private savings account. Small, hidden. Transferred what I could before anything got frozen or accidentally auto-transferred to something in her name. I also pulled my credit report. No new accounts. Yet. But I knew her well enough to know that Celeste was a slow thief. Not the kind who stole your wallet, but the kind who took $10 every week and told you it was for dinner. Back in the motel, I stared at the ceiling again. It looked darker tonight. Less like Florida. More like a bruise. Maybe fitting, considering how I felt, bruised, not broken. But something changed in me that night. I stopped feeling like a victim. Not because I was okay. God, I was not okay. But because I realized they didn't take everything. They still needed my name. They still needed my signature. They didn't know I knew that. So I was going to wait. Quietly. I was going to let them think I was unraveling in a motel with bad wallpaper and a stale vending machine dinner. But behind the scenes, I was going to prepare. Because this wasn't just a betrayal. It was a mutiny. And I'd be damned if I let the pirates sail away with my ship. 3 days in that motel, and I stopped seeing my reflection. Not literally, but close. The mirror above the sink was so fogged and cracked that I could barely make out my own face unless I leaned in and held my breath. The light above it buzzed constantly, like it was chewing on every thought I tried to quiet. I barely slept. I ate once a day, usually out of guilt, not hunger. And the only reason I showered was because the water pressure felt like it was punishing me, and I figured I deserved it. But the weird thing was, I wasn't angry. Not yet. That's the part one keep thinking about. Even after everything, I still wasn't mad. I was just stunned. Like someone had quietly taken my whole life, rearranged the furniture, and told me I was insane for noticing. I kept expecting a message, a call, even a fake apology. But nothing. Just silence from Celeste and the sisters. Not even a breadcrumb of guilt. Until the black SUV showed up. It was about 9:30 p.m. I'd just gotten out of the shower, wrapped in the motel's version of a towel, which was more like a damp napkin, when I saw the headlights outside my window. They didn't flicker past or park across the lot like the usual guests. No, this car pulled in slow, deliberate, and stopped directly in front of my room. Engine running. Lights on. Like they wanted me to know they were there. At first, I froze. It's hard to describe the feeling of being watched when you're at your lowest. You feel transparent, like they can see every mistake you ever made. I stepped back into the darkness of the room, peeked through the curtain. The windows were tinted. I couldn't see the driver. But I knew one thing. They weren't here by accident. I waited. 10 minutes passed. No one got out. No one moved. The engine just hummed, loud and steady, like a threat with no words. I texted a buddy of mine, Paul, just in case. He was the only one who knew where I was staying. But before he could even reply, the SUV pulled out slowly and left. Not fast. Not like someone who realized they were in the wrong spot. But slow. Like someone who wanted me to know they'd been there. Wanted me to feel that drop in my stomach and the spike in my pulse. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, I drove to the bank again. I needed to be sure the house title was still untouched. It was. But the teller, a guy named Malik who'd helped me open the mortgage originally, gave me a weird look when I asked him to double-check everything. He leaned in and said, "You didn't authorize a second signer, did you?" My heart sank. I hadn't. Obviously. But someone had requested it. Not completed. Just requested. He couldn't give me details. Legal stuff. Privacy. But he said something was flagged and in review. That was all I needed to hear. Celeste was trying to tie my name to something. Or remove it. Or fake consent. I don't know. But it meant she was moving faster than I thought. That same day, I started calling lawyers. I left voicemails with 4, actually got a call back from one. A woman named Shauna who specialized in marital property disputes. She sounded confident. Too confident. Like someone who's seen this exact scam play out 100 times with slightly different flavors. She said something that stuck with me. "This isn't new, Harlan. You're just the latest guy they're betting will walk away quietly." That's when the anger started. I didn't scream or punch a wall. That's not me. I just sat in my car, gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white, and promised myself something. They don't get to rewrite the story. They don't get to exile me from my own life and then play house with my things, my money, my name. So I did the one thing Celeste never expected. I went back to the house. Not to knock. Not to beg. But to listen. I parked 4 doors down, cracked the window, and waited. And what I heard when the door opened wasn't her voice. It was a man's. It was low, confident. That kind of voice that doesn't knock. It just walks through doors and assumes you'll make room. I couldn't make out every word, but the cadence was unmistakable, deep and too familiar. I leaned out of my car just enough to catch the shape of him through the living room window as he stepped inside. Tall, built, shaved head, carrying a leather laptop bag like it weighed nothing. He didn't knock. He used a key. I froze. Every instinct screamed that I shouldn't be here. I was risking a trespass call or worse. But something in my gut told me I needed to know who he was. So I stayed, eyes locked on that house I used to call mine. He walked in like he'd done it before, like this was routine. And then Celeste hugged him. Not a side hug, not a thanks for stopping by kind of hug. It was slow, tight, with her face buried in his chest like he was the one who'd protected her from something, not me. Not the guy who gave her 5 years of Sundays and forgave 1,000 quiet slights. I sank low in the driver's seat like a coward, my chest buzzing with panic. I didn't recognize his face, not fully. But that voice, that posture, it scratched at something in the back of my brain. And then it hit me. It was my old coworker. From 2 years ago, Vince. We'd worked a project together out in Durham. He was subcontracted through a design firm for the interiors while I handled flooring and foundation. We only overlapped for a couple months, but I remembered the way Celeste had acted the one time she met him. We'd gone out for drinks after a late install. I brought her along because she was already in the area. She laughed harder at his jokes than she ever did at mine. Brushed something off his sleeve that didn't need brushing. I noticed. I didn't say anything. Back then, I still gave her the benefit of the doubt. I didn't think anything came of it. He was just another loud guy with expensive shoes and a fake smile. Until now. Now he was in my house. Now he had a key. And now Celeste was pouring him wine from the bottle I bought for our 3rd anniversary. I felt something inside me fracture. Not rage. Not sadness. Something worse. Confirmation. That gnawing suspicion I'd been gaslighting myself about for years was real. She was never bored. Never distant. Never overwhelmed. She was busy. Replacing me. Piece by piece. While I painted walls and fixed baseboards and bought groceries, she never ate. He stayed for hours. I couldn't hear much once they moved deeper into the house, but I didn't need to. I saw the shadows in the window, the occasional flicker of movement. At one point, Mavis walked past in one of my old shirts. She always hated me, called me husband furniture. I guess now she gets to use my stuff without the inconvenience of me breathing nearby. At 1:14 a.m., the porch light flicked off. A few minutes later, the SUV backed out of the driveway and rolled past me. I slumped down, held my breath, prayed he didn't see me. But he didn't slow down. Didn't even glance sideways. I waited another 15 minutes before driving away. My hands were shaking. I didn't even realize I'd been gripping the steering wheel so hard until I got back to the motel, and my palms were raw with crescent-shaped marks from my own fingernails. Back in the room, I sat in the corner, lights off, phone in hand, just staring at that calendar entry again. Final phase begins. It made sense now. He wasn't a coincidence. He was part of it. Maybe he had been for longer than I wanted to admit. Maybe that's why Camille was involved. Maybe this whole thing wasn't just a betrayal. It was an extraction. Like I was a virus being removed from the system. I opened my laptop. I still had access to our shared storage drive, something she clearly forgot. I searched Vince in the document titles. Nothing. Then I searched interior. Dozens of folders popped up. Client files, invoices, design boards. Some from the Durham project. One stood out, labeled Temp 021. I clicked. It was empty. But the date it was created? 3 days before I was locked out. The last person who modified it? Celeste. I wasn't sure what I was looking at yet. But one thing was clear. She wasn't just replacing me. She was building a new version of our life, and this guy, Vince, he wasn't the rebound. He was the upgrade. At least, that's what they thought. But what they didn't know is, I'm not done. They planned for me to be quiet. They planned for me to disappear. They didn't plan for me to start documenting. The hardest part wasn't seeing Vince in my house. It wasn't hearing my wife laugh like she used to, only now with someone else. It wasn't even being erased from the life I paid for, as brutal and humiliating as that was. No, the hardest part was knowing they weren't afraid. That every step they'd taken, changing the locks, moving him in, freezing me out, they did with complete confidence that I wouldn't fight back. They thought I was just a harmless doormat with a day job and a weak spine. They thought I'd cry into a motel pillow and eventually just go away. So I didn't fight. Not yet. I watched. I listened. And I kept digging. The next morning, I skipped breakfast, skipped the lawyer call, and went straight back into the shared cloud storage that Celeste clearly hadn't thought to lock me out of. I wasn't even sure what I was searching for anymore, just names, dates, invoices, any crack in their foundation. Most of the folders were work-related. Boring. branded files, graphic templates, half-finished client decks. But tucked inside a folder marked Q4 Strategy, which looked like a boring budget document, was something she'd buried. A PDF file named cohabitation_break_draft3. PDF. My heart started hammering. I opened it, and what I read changed everything. It was a template agreement, written in sterile legalese, outlining the terms for a mutual separation of cohabitants, where one party would vacate the shared residence under pre-agreed financial terms, while forfeiting all claims to equity, assets, or physical property. There was a blank line for the vacating party's name, but at the bottom, I saw it. Prepared by Camille M., independent legal consultant. She wasn't a coach. She wasn't a therapist. She was the architect of my removal. There were versions. Draft 1. Draft 2. This was Draft 3, meaning this plan wasn't spontaneous. It had been evolving. Negotiated. Built behind the scenes while I was at work thinking we were just in a rough patch. And the worst part? I wasn't just being kicked out. I was being baited into signing it myself. Somewhere along the line, they had expected me to come crawling back. And when I did, that's when Celeste would smile, apologize, maybe cry a little, and put a document in front of me. Tell me it was just to make things smoother. That it was mutual. That it was just paperwork. I was supposed to sign it in shame and be grateful they let me keep my dignity. But now I knew. They didn't want a divorce. That would mean court. A fight. Transparency. They wanted a clean exit. The kind where I vanish without legal consequences. Without touching the equity in the house or contesting anything. And Vince. He was the replacement husband, sure. But more importantly, he was part of the rollout. A distraction. A reward. I backed out of the folder, heart pounding so hard I could barely breathe. And that's when I saw something even worse. Another file. A Word doc. Titled simply, Exit Timeline. I opened it. It wasn't long. Just a bulleted list. Each line was dated. Precise. Creepy. June 2nd. Begin distance phase. Limit shared meals. Cancel couple plans. July 11th. Initiate overwhelm strategy. Increase noise, sister presence. August 1st. Withdraw intimacy. Mention needing space. August 24th. Introduce Vince as emergency consultant. Casual presence. September 3rd. Trigger conversation finances. Document behavior. September 5th. Change locks. September 7th to 15th. Observe behavior. Determine if legal action is necessary. I was an experiment. A checklist. They orchestrated everything. Even my reactions, my quiet pleas, my frustrated tone, my awkward spreadsheet. Those were expected. Tracked. Evaluated. I slammed the laptop shut and nearly threw it across the room. I didn't know whether to scream or sob. I didn't do either. I just sat there in that awful motel chair, in silence, until the sun came up. They planned to make me think I was crazy. But they made a mistake. They left the door to their plan open long enough for me to see the entire blueprint. So now, I have a new plan. And this time, I'm the one writing the timeline. The first move wasn't dramatic. No slash tires. No confrontation. No angry texts. I didn't have the luxury of rage. They'd been operating in silence for months, maybe longer. If I wanted to hit back, it had to be from the shadows they thought I crawled into permanently. So I made a copy of everything. All the files. The PDF. The exit timeline. Camille's name. Vince's timestamps. I created a burner Google Drive under an alias I'd used back in college. An old joke from my gaming days. Nobody would tie it to me. Then I shared the drive with one single person. Mavis. Why her? Because Mavis was the weakest link. Always had been. She was loyal. Yes, but only as long as she felt like she was winning. Mavis liked power, but she loved control. And the second she realized she wasn't in the inner circle, that she wasn't being told the full story, she'd unravel faster than the others. I didn't write a message. Just the link, sent from a throwaway email with the subject, "You're not as important as you think." Then I waited. 2 days passed. Nothing. I started to wonder if I'd miscalculated. Maybe she didn't open it. Maybe Celeste warned them all to change passwords. Maybe they already found the breach. But then, at 1:27 a.m., on the third night, my motel phone rang. Not my cell. My motel landline, the one I never gave to anyone. I let it ring. Twice. 3 times. Then I answered. Silence. I didn't say a word. I just waited. Finally, a voice. Mavis. You think you're clever, she said, but her tone was wrong. She sounded shaky, like someone who just watched the ground shift beneath them. I'm not trying to be clever, I said calmly. I'm just making sure you know where you stand. You have no idea what you're dealing with, Harlan. Oh, I think I do, I replied. But I don't think you do. Because if Camille left you out of the plan, if Celeste didn't show you the drafts, then maybe you're not part of the decision-making after all. Another pause. I could hear her breathing. Shallow. Uneven. I didn't sign anything, she muttered. I know. Click. That was it. She hung up. I sat back, my heart pounding but steady. That was the first crack. I didn't need her to confess. I just needed her to panic. To ask questions. To sow doubt inside their little circle. Because women like Mavis don't go down with a sinking ship. They jump first. And when they do, they talk. Loudly. Sure enough, by the next afternoon, I saw it happen. I parked down the street again, pretending to scroll through my phone, eyes flicking between my screen and the house. At 4:43 p.m., Mavis stormed out of the front door with a duffel bag, yelling over her shoulder. Celeste followed, trying to stay calm, her voice raised but controlled. Jolene appeared behind them, arms crossed, trying to act like a peacemaker but visibly annoyed. I couldn't hear the words, but the body language said everything. Mavis was out. She got into an Uber, slammed the door, and never looked back. Celeste stood in the doorway for a few seconds, head low, rubbing her temples. Then she turned and went back inside. And suddenly the balance shifted. Not a lot, just enough. That night, I called Shauna, the lawyer who'd helped me open the private account, and told her everything. The files, the timeline, the attempted title change, the informal legal agreements. She didn't sound surprised. I've seen this playbook before, she said. What you're describing isn't new, but your documentation is rare. Most men don't gather receipts until it's too late. I have more than receipts, I said. I have leverage. She laughed, not unkindly. Then you're not a victim anymore. But I wasn't ready to believe that. Not yet. Because I knew Celeste. And I knew something was coming. I could feel it. That kind of silence after a fight. The thick, loaded kind. It doesn't last forever. She'd lost control of Mavis. She'd lost her secrecy. But she still had Vince. And something told me she was about to use him. 3 days passed after Mavis left, and everything went quiet. Too quiet. I expected noise, retaliation, legal emails, maybe another visit from Vince with his smug SUV and fake designer watch. But instead, silence. It unsettled me more than any shouting match ever could. Then came the letter. Not an email. Not a text. A letter, printed and hand-delivered by courier to the motel front desk. A single page, clean, impersonal, typed in a font so sterile it felt like a hospital bed. Effective immediately, you are hereby invited to settle the matter of property division through a mutual separation agreement as outlined in the prior documentation shared via counsel. No litigation will be pursued, pinning your signature within 7 business days. Below it, a thin stack of printed paperwork, almost identical to the original cohabitation break draft I'd found in the shared drive. But this one was finalized, notarized, and now signed. By Celeste. My name was the only one missing. I didn't even read the rest. I drove straight to Shauna's office and dropped the letter on her desk like it was a weapon. She flipped through it once, smirked, and said, "They're scared. This is a white flag. Polished, professional, and desperate. Can we flip it on them?" I asked. She nodded. "Oh, we can do better than that." We filed an official notice of fraudulent manipulation in a domestic cohabitation agreement, with supplemental exhibits, the exit timeline, the undisclosed cohabitation agreement drafts, the evidence of planned financial coercion, and Vince's early presence during the period they claimed was non-romantic. Shauna's paralegal even cross-referenced the timestamps from the home's doorbell camera backup I'd managed to recover, something they forgot to disable from the cloud entirely. That alone, enough to tank any clean separation deal. It didn't go to court. Celeste didn't want it public. The deal they offered was rewritten on my terms. Full title returned to me. She and her sisters vacated the home within 14 days. Vince. Never heard from again. I assume she cut him loose the minute it became clear he was more liability than upgrade. The morning I got the keys back, I didn't even go inside right away. I stood in the driveway, staring at the place where they'd left my bags on the porch, where they'd taped the note telling me to reflect on my actions. And I did. But this time, I smiled. The house was empty when I walked in. Cold. Quiet. Echoes in the hallway and a few dents in the drywall from someone slamming a door too hard. Most of the furniture was gone. Good. It felt like a blank slate. I took a deep breath. I didn't feel like a winner. I didn't feel triumphant or powerful or clever. I just felt free. And that was better. In the weeks that followed, I fixed what needed fixing. Replaced the locks. Repainted the guest room a new color. Removed the double sink in the master bathroom and put in one, just for me. The silence no longer felt like a punishment. It felt earned. I got a promotion at work. Moved into a lead role. Started cooking for myself again. Read books I used to pretend I didn't have time for. Started laughing again. Really laughing. Not that nervous, filtered version I used to give her to keep the peace. One Sunday afternoon, while repotting the only houseplant that survived the purge, my phone buzzed with an unknown number. I answered without thinking. Hey, it's Celeste. That voice, smaller now. Not broken, but smaller. Measured. Trying not to sound like she cared, but she did. I could hear it. I wanted to say, I'm sorry. I think I lost sight of a lot of things. I let the silence hang between us for a long, long time. Then I said, I hope you find what you're looking for. And I hung up. That night, I took the plant out to the porch, set it down next to a brand new welcome mat that didn't belong to anyone but me. And as the sun set behind the trees and the breeze swept through the quiet of my reclaimed home, I whispered, to no one in particular, reflect on that.